Sorry, are you tired of this topic yet? Hey nerds, what's up? So I have seen a plethora of think pieces and articles and blog posts about BookTok ruining reading over the last couple of years. And the problem I find with a lot of these articles that I've read is they tend to come off very elitist, very judgmental, I am trying to prove that I am actually a better reader than all of these other readers out there. They also tend to oversimplify their arguments and not really dig deep on why they feel that way and make no attempt to understand why so many people and readers are so attracted to BookTok. However, there's also this problem I've increasingly noticed in multiple spaces, not just book spaces, which is the idea of, just let people live. If people are having fun, who cares? And where is this intersection of, yes, just letting people enjoy the things they enjoy without a ton of criticism, but also the idea that we can and maybe should validly critique social trends and how they may be influencing global trends and where society is going. So today my goal was to try to research a bit and really dig deep into some of the arguments against BookTok. Four of the most common ones I see, which are that it cares too much about aesthetics, it glorifies overconsumption, it shortens attention spans, and it promotes trashy books. I think it's always important to bring our own biases to the table and up front when we talk about these things. So full disclosure, I do not have a TikTok and I have never had a TikTok account. For personal reasons, I keep my social media use very limited because I find that I do not personally find a lot of joy in the way that those platforms suck my time. And so I have never really been interested in being on it. On the other hand, I know personally a lot of bookish TikTok creators who I think are incredibly intelligent and creative and are adding a lot to the book space. So I'm obviously naturally defensive of them. So I'm hoping these two disparate feelings about TikTok will kind of balance each other out today. With that said, let's dive into the topic of BookTok ruining reading after the jump. I wanted to start our first argument off with that BookTok overly cares about aesthetics, that BookTok only promotes books if the covers look a certain way, that they only care about how their bookshelves look, and that, gasp, they even color coordinate their tabs to their book covers. And who even uses tabs anyway? That's so performative. I started with this one because to me, in many ways, this is the strangest one in my opinion. I think this zero-sum game of either you like good aesthetics or you promote deep thinking about books and are a real reader, super inauthentic. Humans have always naturally been drawn to beautiful things. Humans are naturally drawn to aesthetics and certain ratios, and there's, that's what art classes are, talking about those things that people are naturally drawn to and what looks natural and good for the eye. So I think that people like pretty and aesthetic things isn't just like automatically bad and means you can't be a real reader. Like, for example, if you're going to tab a book, is it really that much extra work to tab a book in colors that match the cover? Now, I'm defending this and I don't even do it. I brought a little example. I don't actually tab that often, only in specific circumstances, but I tabbed recently when I reread Game of Thrones last year, and I use colors to help me re-navigate. So I think in this case, the red tabs are things I wanted to bring up for a Sansa defense, and the blue ones are for a Catelyn defense. It might have been the other way around, but I use my colors just to help me remember why I'm tabbing something. In this case, it was for two different characters. But if I had wanted to match my tabs to this cover, this is a bad example because it would be black, but if I wanted to tab it to this color, like it would be 10 seconds of extra work. I don't think that would necessarily mean I somehow wasn't thinking about the book. I just think for some reason people are getting really hung up on little things like that, and it's kind of barking up the wrong tree. As far as promoting books with only the right aesthetics, I can't really see that as very different than how I used to engage with books before the internet, which is that, well, not before the internet, but before social media, which is that I would walk into a bookstore and look at the shelves and pull a book off the shelves because it looked nice And if you've never done that, I honestly think you're a liar. Maybe not, but generally when I used to go into a bookstore, I'd see, yes, a cover that caught my eye, and then I'd pick it up and turn it over and read the back and see if it still caught my eye. In fact, I read a whole series literally just because of how beautiful the covers were. Okay, I think this is normal. Book aesthetics have always been a thing, and people are also concerned now that BookTok is influencing cover trends because covers want to look good to succeed on BookTok. And I also don't see how that's any different than what book covers have been doing this whole time. There's a reason I can pick up my Wheel of Time book and we can laugh and say, wow, what a 90s cover, because 90s fantasies looked a certain way. And I can pick up this book and say, when I first got this at the used bookstore and was like, this cover was probably an 80s cover, and be right, because we had certain aesthetics. And in fact, if you see really popular series that have at least had, like, say, 30 years, and how you see that their covers have evolved in each decade when they republish them, you see the trends of the publishing industry. The only huge difference I see is that this is maybe being more pushed and influenced by the book influencers on social media versus a top-down publisher tastemaker. But there have always been aesthetic trends, and I just don't necessarily think this is the end of reading. What I actually think people might really be concerned with when they bring up the aesthetics of BookTok or Bookstagram or BookTube, all of them participate in it, they might really actually be expressing a worry over overconsumption. Based on the stuff I've personally seen, I wonder if this focus on aesthetics is really trying to get to the underlying issue of, is the focus on aesthetics causing overconsumption? Can you be this aesthetically pleasing without buying irresponsibly? People buying hundreds and hundreds of books to fill bookshelves to fit a certain aesthetic, but they are not reading them. Or a really popular phrase I've seen for the past while on picking up steam is the idea of book buying is a different hobby than book reading. Now, admittedly, when I first started seeing this phrase, I really feel like it was used tongue-in-cheek and was just expressing the very normal feeling of wanting to buy books you're excited about when you already have unread books at home. But as it's picked up steam and as I've seen it more and more, I've seen it taken very seriously as almost a badge of honor that I am a book buyer more than a book reader. I just love buying books. I think the first thing we need to get out of the way when we address this category is that, yes, books are trendy right now. It is a trend to have full bookshelves in your house, just like any trend that may come and go. Where this becomes an issue for people critiquing this movement is that if you have been a lifelong book lover and reader and collector, when something becomes trendy, it can be difficult to not have an immediate gut negative reaction. It's this feeling of, okay, are people going to walk into my house and see my bookshelves and think that I'm just following a trend when I have been doing this since childhood, when I have lived in a 400 square foot studio apartment with my husband and he's like, do we really need to have this many books shoved in every nook and cranny and under our bed because they're from your childhood and you can't let them go? Not that I'm speaking from personal experience. And you know what? You just have to let it go. You just have to let it go. Yes. Are some people going to buy books and get into reading because it's a popular trend and abandon it the minute it's not? Yeah. But are there also going to be people who maybe just never had the opportunity to get into it or never the desire until it really became trendy and are now finding a new love in reading and books that they will have for life? Also, yes. Just because somebody gets into something during a trend doesn't automatically make it bad, but it can make people who have been a part of that hobby or thing defensive. Time will prove you right. The things you've always loved will still be things you love, whether it's a trend or not. And I think this part of it, that defensiveness, brings a level into this conversation that's just not useful. But as far as buying without reading anything, yes, I actually will be critiquing this. I think overconsumption has just seeped into every part of our lives, and not just like in the book niche. The haul is an extremely known video topic, and you witness it in all sorts of trends like clothing, makeup, water bottles, home decor, whatever it is. And that's just not a TikTok thing. If I look up book haul on YouTube, there is plenty there. I think it's easy to connect overconsumption to TikTok because there always kind of has to be the scapegoat, but the reality is overconsumption is easier than ever. You used to have to leave your house to overconsume. You used to have to at least go find a store with the things you want, and now everything you could ever want or hope to buy is literally a click of the button away from your house. There's a well-established link between dopamine rushes and purchasing. It's why we have the common phrase retail therapy. One interesting thing I found in my research, though, is that they have linked this dopamine rush with retail therapy to a sense of control, that buyers feel it gives them control when they look for something and decide to purchase it and it shows up. And the idea of control was particularly interesting to me because I think I have seen a huge rise in the last 5 or 6 years of people feeling out of control with the state of the world, out of control with what is happening. And so the idea for me that people are continually attempting to gain control could also potentially lead the rise of these activities that give us a sense of control. So if anything, TikTok seems to be more of a symptom of this problem rather than the root of the problem. We can blame it, but that's not really doing anything to suss out the underlying issues that are leading to the desire of this overconsumption. Obviously, the extremity is what really is the big problem. Have we all gone to a bookstore and bought new books when we had unread books at home? Obviously, that's a very common book reader thing. But have we bought 25 or 50 or have 100 or 200 physical books sitting at home unread? And is that excess a problem? And when it comes to book buying as a hobby, is that really any more dangerous than any other home decor item that you just want to buy to put on a shelf? I'd probably argue yes, just assuming because most decor items you only buy 1 or 2 of, unlike books, which to fill a bookshelf takes hundreds and hundreds of books. Additionally, physical books that are going unread are leading to paper waste. I did try to look up just like in general what the book waste is, and it is very difficult. There are so many different stats that don't really go back to any specific study. The best thing I could find was actually a United States EPA report from 2009, which obviously would only focus on waste within the United States, so not globally. And even then, it was a little difficult because they didn't necessarily say how they got to that number, whether it was just a sampling of a few waste sites or how many there were. But their report said 640,000 tons of book waste, which is a lot. Now, 2009 was 16 years ago, so our book buying habits have changed a lot since then. We obviously saw a huge rise in e-readers, which took up a portion of the market before steadying out. And on the other side of that, we also have data that more books are being published than ever before. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they are being produced physically, but I think we can use our brain that over the time with the rise recently of physical book buying being more in vogue and the fact that we'd have less because of the rise of e-readers, that the numbers are at least not less than that 2009 value. And so that's a lot of paper waste. So yes, I'm gonna say it, I think it's a problem. Continually buying things you have no intention of using, especially if it's not in some moderation, seems like an issue. We're obviously all consumers. I'm not sitting here on some high horse being like, I have never overconsumed something in my life. Like, obviously we could all work on our consumption habits, but when I am talking about a trend of it being funny and encouraged to repeatedly buy things you will never use, I think we can criticize that. However, once again, this is not isolated to TikTok. This is not a TikTok problem. This is an everything and every platform and internet problem. And I think we instead have to think about what's the underlying reason, what's the emotion that is propelling us to overbuy things we have no intention of using to get that feeling of buying and solve that first. Let's fix the root of the problem rather than just the manifestations of it. Now, let's go over one more criticism before we tie all this together. The other big criticism I see is the length of TikTok videos. Now, I think the shortening of content has been an increasing concern for years over the shortening of our attention span. In a previous video, I did go over how one of the main stats that we now as humans collectively have an attention span smaller than a goldfish. That was, by the way, reported on by many very established and reputable sources, ended up being based on nothing. The study didn't actually exist and wasn't true. Additionally, many people have come out to say that the idea of a single attention span or a universal attention span is pretty misleading, because people will have a different attention span based on their own personal history, what activity they're doing. And so the idea of just a universal attention span is kind of a misnomer. What we need is specificity, which, if my experience with scientific studies or statistics has proven anything, specificity, that's a tough word, has always been important. You need to really research these things in narrow capacities to make any sort of statement. Now, most of the research I found dealing with social media was actually focused a lot on adolescence and just broadly the emotional and behavioral effects on social media in adolescence, particularly when it relates to ADHD. And so obviously those things did overlap with attention, but also broadly looked at other things as well. One study I found that I thought was particularly interesting was one that wanted to know about collective global attention span. So as groups, has our attention span shortened? And they did that by searching through decades of data online, like through Google Trends, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, and looked at what was trending and if the average time that a topic trends has gotten shorter over the last few decades. And they found that it did. So that was interesting, but it's very important to note that that is collective attention span and not individual attention span. So altogether though, there is this growing sense that collectively and individually, we are moving towards shorter attention spans. One measure of this I've seen talked about a lot recently, and I wanted to briefly cover, was the idea of secondary screen viewing. And the idea that TV shows and movies are now being written to cater to individuals who are distracted because they are not just singularly viewing that piece of media, but are also on a phone or a tablet or a computer. This one is a bit complicated because while it does seem that the term secondary screen viewing has picked up a lot in the last year or so as it has become a topic of interest, that the term wasn't coined super recently. I found research that used that term in 2014, and that probably wasn't even the first usage of the term. This research that I found a decade ago on this topic, however, focused more on the positive aspects of how companies could utilize second screen interactions to increase engagement, whereas now I feel like the term has taken on a much more negative connotation. In 2018, Nielsen reported that 88% of TV watchers used a second device while watching. That stat felt pretty staggering. And because it was so staggering, that was obviously the stat that has gotten reported and repeated multiple times. And in fact, is the only stat I could really find until I tracked down the actual Nielsen report, which, as you can see, paints a little bit of a different picture, with only 45% of respondents saying they use a second screen always or very often, meaning others use it less frequently, which may mean they only use their devices during commercials, or perhaps when they're not as invested in the show, perhaps they are watching with another partner or friend who is the one invested, or even purposely putting something on in the background that you have already seen before while you do a menial task. Now, this might have seemed like an incredibly long aside for talking essentially about the length of TikTok videos, but it felt very important to go on this journey because I wanted to bring up how difficult these things are to measure, how difficult it is to get good data. Now, while we do know general trends, the problem with this is many people commenting on this tend to just go on vibes or their general feelings, which is fine, but can also just lead to a lot of bias. So let's go back to TikTok length. First, it's obvious that YouTube and Instagram also have shorts and reels that are the same length as TikTok, but I think because they have other primary functions and TikTok's primary function is this short, that is why it gets called out most in this form of media usage. It should be noted that TikTok has slowly raised its maximum video length from 1 minute to 3 minutes to most recently 10 minutes. Now, it does seem that at some point they allowed their users to upload videos up to 60 minutes. But as I can't finding conflicting reports about that, it seems that it might be something that was taken away because 10 minutes max is the most cited thing I can see now. Based on conversations with creators and an article I found from TikTok themselves that admittedly was written, I think, around 2021, and a lot has changed since then, it seems that despite its increasing length, that TikTok's main function is still the minute or under video. It seems from creators I know and what was stated by TikTok that shorter videos perform better on the platform. Also, from what I read with the TikTok algorithm is that it tends to promote to its users the length of video they most watch. So if you mostly watch content under a minute and stay under a minute, it will keep feeding you that shorts content. So overall, I think we can still consider TikTok, despite its lengthening videos or its ability to lengthen videos, still the main arbiter of extremely short bite-sized content. And you know what? Short form definitely has its benefits for certain types of topics. I think humor content is particularly well suited for minute and under content. It's easy to get 1 or 2 jokes about a topic without belaboring it, make it punchy, and that's obviously very entertaining. It's also really good for quick book recommendations, akin, again, to how you might walk in a bookstore and read the back of a book. You don't spend and belabor a lot of time reading the back of the book. You usually read it and put it down. And in the same way, again, moving an interaction from in-person to online, book creators can give you a very quick sense of what a book is about and is a good way to advertise whether you should pick up that book or not. Also, shorts content is great to experience content you wouldn't normally be drawn to in maybe a 20 or 30 minute long video because it's a topic you didn't know you were interested in, but when delivered to you in a short form is easily digestible and might give you new interests. That said, short form content is generally not going to be well suited to deep analysis or discussions of complicated or nuanced topics. 1 minute is generally not enough to have nuance about anything. And so yes, book discussions on TikTok by necessity probably won't have the same deep analysis or deep discussion if you're keeping all of your videos to under 1 minute, just out of pure function. And yes, there's also something to be said about how shorts content affects our dopamine. We've already discussed the rush of shopping, but it is well known that any social media sites that employ scrolling, or as we like to call it, doom scrolling, where there is a ever-refreshing feed, can really affect our dopamine levels. I particularly liked the way this article succinctly stated it. The swipe down feature required to refresh one's feed mirrors pulling a slot machine lever, and the variable pattern of reward in the form of entertaining videos on TikTok simulates the intermittent reward pattern of winning or losing on a slot machine. This pattern keeps individuals engaged under the impression that the next play might be the one. Again, that article focused on TikTok, but I think that element is for any social media platform where you can keep scrolling and seeing new content. And the thing is just because shorts content isn't suited towards super nuanced or deep dives doesn't automatically make it bad. There's obviously a place and a desire for both kinds of content. The question is, though, are people still engaging with both types of content, both short and lighthearted and deeper analysis? And the same thing, getting a dopamine rush every once in a while when you need one is fine. The question becomes, are we moderating it? To me, it seems that these 3 criticisms are very related. The aesthetics and the quick turn of content is also leading to overconsumption. They seem tied. And certainly, for example, when you look at those haul videos and the staggering amount of views, it doesn't matter if those views are coming from people genuinely interested in the content or even people just hate watching. It's all feeding into the idea that this content was successful, so I should do it again and maybe even bigger this time to get more attention. And then it's also influencing other people to see that and say, I should do that as well, to either get attention through a social media platform or to do it themselves to get the thrill they feel from the video. One idea that popped up during my research that I found fascinating and very much related to this was the idea of the attention economy. The term is said to have been first coined in the late 1960s by Herbert A. Simon, who was an economist, a political scientist, and a psychologist. A quote I found explaining the term can be found from a speech he made in 1971. Similarly, in an information-rich world, the wealth of information means a dearth of something else, a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention and a need to allocate that attention efficiently among the overabundance of information sources that might consume it. In an information-rich world, most of the cost of information is the cost incurred by the recipient. It is not enough to know how much it costs to produce and transmit information. We must also know how much it costs, in terms of scarce attention, to receive it. I have tried bringing this argument home to my friends by suggesting that they recalculate how much the New York Times or Washington Post costs them, including the cost of reading it. Making the calculation usually causes them some alarm, but not enough for them to cancel their subscriptions. Perhaps the benefits still outweigh the costs. I am in love with this quote and this concept, and one reason I'm in love with this quote is that it is from 1971 and is dealing with newspapers. The idea of our attention being limited, of things grabbing our attention that shouldn't, that are, not good for us, it's not new. It's not new, it's been around. This is an article that's 50 years old and it's talking about newspapers taking up too much time and attention. Technology is ever adapting, and it is bringing up new aspects of this, but the idea of our limited attention and what we are doing with it is not new. I also want to quickly read an analysis of this concept that was written in a United Nations paper because I think it does a good job of further explaining this idea. The attention economy concept has become increasingly popular with the rise of the internet making content supply increasingly abundant and immediately available, and attention becoming the limiting factor in the consumption of information. While the supply of accessible information has continued to grow rapidly, digital data roughly doubles every 2 years. The demand for information is limited by the scarce attention we can give to it. Indeed, the total available attention is limited by the number of people with access to information and the fixed number of hours in a day and conflicting demands on our time and attention. Davenport and Beck first defined the economics of attention as an approach to the management of information that treats human attention as a scarce commodity and applies economic theory to solve various information management problems. We are increasingly living in an attention economy rather than an information economy. All social media platform analytics are driven by the idea of how much attention we can get. What was the click-through rate? How long did the person watch? Did they come back, subscribe, or follow? Did they engage by comment or like? Social platforms run on the attention economy, and they are monetizing it. This, I think, is actually the heart of why we feel so uneasy about these ideas of aesthetics and short blocks of time and overconsumption. We recognize that these things are designed to take up our attention and designed to want more and more and more of our attention. And in fact, they rely on it to grow as businesses and companies. And again, that's not even necessarily just social media. This is just an extension of the problem, not a root of it. Added to this, book reading is often seen as an intellectual pursuit, or at least one that's good for our minds. So the idea of it getting sullied by grabbing attention and monetary things and having reading be something just to be consumed faster and faster and faster and in smaller bite-sized pieces may feel even more of an affront. That said, although these things are often distilled down into TikTok, can we really blame it more than any other social media platform? They're all doing it to various degrees, and so the question becomes, what is our ultimate effect on literacy because of it? Now, there is one major criticism I haven't covered yet, which is the types of books that are most often advertised on BookTok. It's a huge perception that the books advertised on BookTok are shallow, samey, cash grabs that aren't intellectual or even good writing. Trash, as some people might coin it. Well, I have a lot to say about this. First, formulaic, samey fiction has been around forever. pulp fiction action novels are like a well-established thing. I think specifically for whatever reason of Jack Reacher books, just because my dad loves those books. And the author, Lee, I can't remember their first name, was writing one of these a year, and it always came out around my dad's birthday, so I bought him a new one every year until finally he was like, I loved him, but even for me, after the 15th one, they're getting a little samey. Like, this sort of thing has existed forever. I think a lot of what has happened is what I would call survivorship bias, where we can look at old books and be like, books used to be so much better, but really the books that have stayed in our consciousness and in pop culture tend to be the ones that rose to the top, and so more often than not tend to be better books, while the other ones that were just like that fell to the wayside. I think a big part of it is that we just feel so much more bombarded with it now. Like I previously mentioned in a video, I discovered that more books are being published than ever. So by pure volume, it just may feel like a lot. And again, we are not walking into a bookstore or reading specific tastemaker articles about these books, but rather are being bombarded every time we go on social media in our own homes. I also think gender may be at play. A lot of our previous ideas of samey and formulaic pulp fiction novels were often geared towards a male reader. And from what I understand and what I see on BookTok, a lot of these books are instead advertised to the market of a female reader. And I just don't think we can ignore that as a factor of this discussion. Now, this video is always very long and I don't want to get too off topic, but I would highly recommend Lindsay Ellis's video on this topic if you haven't already seen the video. It is one of my absolute favorites of hers. It covers the disproportional hate that things women like get, particularly things that young women like get. It seems an important part of this discussion when most of the books I see getting called trashy from BookTok are books that are promoted by and promoted to women. What I want to do is circle back to what I talked about in the very beginning of this video, of the idea of let people live, let people enjoy what they enjoy. Because yes, I do think it's important to acknowledge that not all hobbies and all entertainment needs to be intellectually stimulating. I like playing video games. I love video games, okay? I play them a lot. It is very relaxing for me and I highly enjoy it. I am under no false notions that somehow me playing video games is a grand intellectual pursuit that is increasing my mind, okay? I play them because I enjoy it and it relaxes me and I get happiness and joy from it. It's perfectly okay just to enjoy fun things. So in that same vein, if people want to read books that are just pure entertainment and fun and enjoyable and make them happy, can we really be like, no, you can't have anything that just only brings happiness and joy and fun? Especially because as I researched this, I wanted to know, why do people love BookTok so much and the BookTok books? And one thing I saw as I read through multiple forums, a constant reoccurring theme was that people found community through this. People were reading these books and having so much fun discussing them online and creating new friends, and even leading to book clubs in real life where they would meet up with their friends and discuss these just really fun books that they could get really into. And isn't that what all fandom is? Really us just coming together in communities over things we love? That said, I think we can also still ask the question, is that all? Almost 2 decades ago now, my senior English teacher said something that has never left me. When I was young, Harry Potter was the end-all be-all for me. I'm still a fan, but that was it. It was my personality. And I don't even know how we got on the topic, but one day in English class, my teacher and I were talking, and he said something to the effect of this, which is, I love that Harry Potter got so many kids into reading, but I hope they don't stop there. That's not it. There's so much more. At the time, I was so offended. My perception of what he was telling me was that I shouldn't like Harry Potter anymore, that I should be better than it, and that I can't like it. As I've aged and hopefully become wiser, for whatever reason, this thing has stuck with me. And he was right. There is so much more, and I found it. And it's not that I can't still love Harry Potter and what it did in my life, but I found so many other books that caused me to deeply reconsider my own notions, deeply grew me as a person, deeply grew my mind. And I would have never found that if I had just stayed in that same place. And I think this just might be a better attitude to take than the absolute disdain for these books, as if they are so unworthy. What if instead of that, we just said, I'm so glad you loved that book. Have you tried this too? Because yes, it's simply not a big deal that every single thing we do has to be intellectually stimulating. We can just do things for fun and for entertainment. But I'd say we should be doing something to grow. I really believe that. We need to be chasing intellectual growth, or at least practice somewhere. And maybe that's in a career. Maybe that's in a volunteer opportunity. Maybe that's in a hobby. Maybe you take up gardening and you're learning about the seasons and what can grow and not grow in your environment. Maybe you're taking up quilting and you're learning about all the complicated math that's involved in that. Maybe you're starting an exercise journey where you're really learning how to have mental toughness. But are we growing somewhere? Because if we never practice stretching our mind or critical thinking, we will lose it. And yes, reading is a hobby that can do that for you. Is BookTok single-handedly ruining our ability to critically think? No, it's not the root of the issue. It just displays a symptom, which I think can also be found on Bookstagram and BookTube, which is likely that we have felt so little control in our day-to-day lives that often with our entertainment, we want something to just zone out and go into complete oblivion over and not have to think about anything. And obviously that's okay. I think we all need it sometimes. But are we constantly doing that completely at the expense of any personal development? If we don't want to lose our attention span, if we don't want to use our critical thinking, if we do want to keep growing and learning as a person, we do have to practice it sometimes. And that doesn't mean it has to be a drag. It can be fun and enjoyable. For me, reading is a lot of that hobby. I read so many books that have expanded the way I think and have made me work really hard and think about themes and connections and characters. And even BookTube, the act of researching and writing videos is a lot of work and has helped me grow and stretch my thinking in new ways. It's more just like, if every single piece of content you watch is under a minute and sometimes you don't even finish the reels. If every single book you read is incredibly fast-paced, every single one under 250 pages is meant to be consumed as fast as possible with very little depth. If every single movie or TV show you watch, you are constantly on a second screen and have never done it any other way, you could maybe start thinking about your relationship to media. Not in a dire way, not in an all or nothing way, we can never do that or we have to always do it, but just as a check-in. It's amazing that you have found a book community and books that you love, but there may be more. It's important to remember, of course, that these things are obviously talking about trends and not the individual. There are incredible book creators on every platform in every way that are genuinely contributing to literacy and the book space. It's about finding them and also participating in them. The larger trends are always going to matter, but what we always have control over is the individual. And individually, we can influence how we interact with media, how perhaps our children interact with media, or our friends, our family, our acquaintances, just by the things we choose to share. We've come a long way. If you're still here, thank you. Ultimately, yes, are there trends in just the social media book community? Because I don't think it's just TikTok. That maybe concern me. Yes. I think that's natural. As we've seen, that's been a concern for a long time. Can we also have a space to let people live and enjoy things and also validly critique some of these global trends? Also, yes. My ultimate conclusion is that BookTok isn't necessarily worse than any other social media, and that there are concerning things, but that I think we are often concerned by the manifestations of problems rather than the root of them. And sourcing the root of what those issues are leads to a better understanding of how we can influence both ourselves and others to hopefully change the future. I hope that this was useful in any way, that I maybe brought something new to a discussion that I know has been kind of overwrought. I would love to know your guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. Please let me know. This has been long enough, so I'm gonna sign off and say, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading or other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.